As we await word from the Prime Minister today, speaking in about 30 minutes' time, as Glenn just reminded you, and finding out what Ottawa has in store by way of announcements or precautions today, we look back to the big news from the feds yesterday, and that was the all told roughly $82 billion emergency response package for Canadians and businesses. John Paul Lamb is an associate professor of economics at the University of Waterloo, and he joins us to talk about it. John Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm well. Thank you very much.
Glad to hear that. This aid package, this emergency response package that was announced yesterday, obviously necessary. Does it cover the bases that are required at this point?
I think in the short term it does. The government had to act very quickly and decisively in the short run. I won't be surprised if there are more announcements coming up this week and next week, especially trying to bail out certain sectors that have been hit hard in the last couple of weeks. So I think this is part one of what the government is going to do in terms of fiscal stimulus.
When you look further ahead into that crystal ball and the other measures that you might still think to come, what would those look like?
Well, it all depends on how long the economy is going to be shut down. I mean, what struck me with the Prime Minister's statement yesterday, I think I give credit to the government to act very, very quickly and decisively. But I think he said something like that we won't go into a recession. I think I don't think that's unlikely. I think we will go into a recession. Just to put things in perspective, Mike. During the financial crisis, we know that GDP in Canada fell by about 3%, and unemployment shot up. Now we have an economy that is almost shut down. Half of the economy is almost shut down. So you can see that it is extremely likely that we will go into a recession. So which means that we will need more measures, especially for sectors that have been hit very hard, especially the airline industry, the tourism industry, the service sector, especially the hospitality and food sector. So these sectors will definitely need more help from the government in the coming weeks.
Is the government's only real intention here or ability to soften the blow? Because we know how, I hesitate to use the word devastating because I don't want to cause anxiety, but that's what the government is trying to offset to some degree, isn't it? It's trying to mitigate the anxiety we have as consumers, as Canadians.
Well, I think what we are doing is providing much-needed help to Canadian businesses and households to help them cope with all these closures, loss of jobs, and loss of income. Canadians and Canadian businesses are cash-strapped right now because a lot of people have been either laid off or temporarily laid off, and a lot of businesses are closed down, and they have no source of revenue. So without these measures, frankly, what they announced yesterday, many businesses and consumers will go bankrupt. And many Canadian families would not be able to make their mortgage payment, their rent, or pay their bills or put food on the table without direct assistance from the government that is putting money in their hands. So I think what they did yesterday was to alleviate some of the cash flow problems that Canadians and Canadian businesses will have. The situation is evolving so quickly that I think they are still thinking about further ahead what will happen if the economy is still shut down in the next 4 weeks. And like you, I don't want to alarm people, but if this is a real possibility that in the next 6 to 8 weeks the economy is still shut completely, we're still under lockdown. I mean, if we take Wuhan and China as an example, they were shut down for at least 2.5 to 3 months. So we might have a long way to go in terms of how the economy is going to be and how the government is going to respond to this.
The measures that were announced yesterday, John Paul, and the mechanisms that will be used to distribute that money to households, removing waiting periods for EI, using the child care benefits, is that the most effective means of funneling the money to those who need it?
In the short run, it is because they need to do it fairly fast because a lot of Canadians don't have any source of revenue right now. So this is kind of similar what the U.S. is doing in terms of sending checks directly to consumers and to Americans. So what we need is to put money back in the hands of Canadians, to put money in the hands of Canadian businesses so that they don't have to lay off their workers so that they can make payrolls. But Mike, if the economy is shut down, it is, even if you have money to make rent, that's great to make your mortgage payment, but that money is not going to flow the economy if you can't spend it, if part of the economy is shut down. So that's the problem we're going to have. I mean, we definitely need to flatten this infection curve. This is very important, but unfortunately, we're sort of facing a trade-off here. The longer it takes to flatten this trade-off, the more we will have to shut down the economy, and the likelihood of a recession increases as a result.
How concerned are you, Jean-Paul, when you see the reaction of the stock markets?
Oh, I think the stock market is often the case, overreacting to some of the news, but they are pricing in a lot of bad things happening to corporate profits. I think if there is no bailout from the government for certain sectors, especially the airline sector, a lot of these companies will go bankrupt. If we take the hotels, for example, and food and accommodation, if there's no bailout for these companies, they will also go bankrupt in the next couple of months. They have so much cash to burn, and they have only a couple of weeks. So I think the stock market is pricing in a very, very deep recession. During the financial crisis, I keep referring back to this, but this is the latest example we've had in terms of recession. GDP fell by 3%. Here, I think we're looking at maybe GDP falling by 6 to 7 to 8%. It's going to be a fairly big shock. So the stock market is looking ahead and looking at all of that, looking at corporate profits being decimated, and they are reducing their valuation. But let's not forget, Mike, that we started at a level where the stock market was overvalued. So it's coming down, yes, but the way down is much more pronounced than anyone anticipated.
Jean-Paul, we always appreciate your perspective. Stay healthy, and I look forward to talking again.
You too. Take care, Mike.
Jean-Paul Lam is an associate professor of economics at the University of Waterloo, joining us to talk about the aid package, and seems to feel, much like I did, this was a very good starting point, but there seems to be, the government seems to have room to maneuver for even more measures. My greatest concern when I sit here every day is causing widespread alarm or panic in terms of our own health and the spread of this virus, and in terms of our economy. The impacts, though, are massive in magnitude. They are absolutely massive in their magnitude.